Love this one. All right, so here, this is not John now. This is Janet. So Janet is here.
A John sister?
Not really. Not really one liter. All right, so I want you to just say some negative words to Janet right now.
Big head.
You're black or ugly.
You don't see him?
All right. Now you notice Janet is not responding to any of you. Because there are some students who are like that. They do not respond to negative words. They remain calm. They say not a word. But that does not mean that it's not affecting, or that doesn't mean that it's not affecting them on the inside. While you're using those negative words to Janet, she is internalizing those words.
Miss internalizing?
Yes, meaning that deep within herself, yes,
she feel it inside.
You know, use dictionary, Juanita.
Thank you.
Miss she go on like she bright.
This is a positive. Positive. Everybody say positive.
Positive.
Positive words, positive action.
Yes.
So Janet is not responding, but she's thinking about it. And each time a negative word is said to her or something wrong is being done, she's getting angry, cross, miserable on the inside. And that stores up and it's there, thinking about it, until it gets to that place where in John's case, he exploded. But in this case, we call it implode, which is the opposite of explode, meaning that on the inside, all the feelings just break free, and she becomes depressed.
Like a bomb.
Yes, like a bomb, but it's on the inside. So on the outside, we will not see a negative reaction, but on the inside, she's thinking of very good step, hurting herself. She's sad and depressed and suicidal. And she is now ready to do something bad to herself. So these are the students that we need to look out for, our classmates, who sometimes they don't say a word, but we look at their facial expression and their body language, and we see that something is wrong, and that's the time we use positive words to help our classmates. Okay? So we have to deal with our feelings in positive ways, use kind words, positive words, and do not get out your phone and you you know what we love to do, right? Video it and sending it all over the school. No, we do our best.
Or say bad things about her on Facebook.
Right, we don't do that. We help them to manage behavior. That is what we're all about. So thank you for joining us, and I trust that you have benefited in some way from our demonstration. We spoke about managing the feelings, and in our next video, we will be sharing some techniques as our strategies as to how we can manage our negative feelings so that we can avoid conflicts. Thank you.
The good news is you can protect yourself and your family against the coronavirus called COVID-19. Wash your hands more. The more you wash your hands, the less likely you will pass on the virus. You should wash your hands for 20 seconds. 20 seconds is the time it takes to sing the happy birthday song twice. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear the world. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear the world. Happy birthday to you. When you are finished washing your hands, use a piece of tissue to turn off the pipe and throw it in the garbage. Protect yourself and your parents from the coronavirus or COVID-19.
This week on PBCJ Presents.
We have an issue currently in terms of literacy, children actually reading and comprehending what they are reading. So we want to get back to the basics. We want to say to parents, grandparents in the homes, you know, when you are relaxing from your day's work, have your child read something to you. It could be anything. Books are available. Again, come to the library, register your child so they're able to check out a book or two and take it home and just have them read it to you.
Why is the world running short on food? And many, even in the Caribbean, are going hungry. Find out on the next Central Bank of Barbados Caribbean Economic Forum on Addressing Food Security in the Caribbean. Joseph Cox, Sedley Michael McLaughlin Jr., and Regis Chapman will explore the social and economic impact of this crisis on Wednesday, July 12th at 8 p.m. Barbados, 7 p.m. Jamaica. Follow on this station or online at centralbank.org.bb.
Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, Ambassador Celia Monteith. We also have Dr. Kassan Troop, who is acting CEO in the Ministry of Education, Mrs. Michelle McIntosh Harvey, who is the acting CEO of the Child Care and Protection Family Services Agency, as well as Mr. Varden Downer, Senior Director at the National Works Agency, and Mr. Andrew Evans, who is a consultant on the South Coast Highway Improvement Project. We also have the permanent secretary, acting permanent secretary rather, in the Ministry of Education and Youth, who is also here with us, and that's Mrs. Maureen Dwyer. There are many other persons here this morning, but in the interest of time, I would just like to welcome all the representatives from the ministry's departments and agencies, as well as persons from the media and those watching and listening online. I will run through quickly some of the decisions of Cabinet before we have our presentations. I would like to announce that Cabinet decided to approve Major Karen Burrell as Executive Director of the Financial Services Commission, who is Executive Director of the Financial Services Commission, as an ex officio member of the Board of Directors of the Jamaica International Financial Services Authority. There are also the appointment of several persons to the Integrated Water Management Council for the period of 12 years between the 3rd of July 2023 to the 2nd of July 2026, and that is chaired by Minister Matthew Samuda, who is Minister without portfolio in the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation as chairman. It includes Mr. Yannick Watson, Mrs. Arlene Williams, Mr. Kevoy Osborne, Mr. Omar Alcock, Mrs. Jacqueline Spence-Hemmings, and several other individuals. There was also the approval of the appointment of Mr. Ainsley Henry as the Jamaican Government Permanent Director on the board of the Environmental Foundation of Jamaica. And this is following the resignation of Ms. Renee Oliphant. We also have the approval of persons to the Electricity Appeals Tribunal for the period of 2 years, effective July 3, 2023 to the 2nd of July, 2025. And that's the Honorable Miss Justice Retired Gloria Smith, who is the chairperson, as well as Dr. Adrian Stokes and Miss Shirley Ann Eaton. We also had the approval of the appointment of the following persons to the enterprise team for the privatization of the Agricultural Marketing Corporation, AMC Complex. This includes land and buildings on Spanish Town Road, and that's Miss Nerin Small, Miss Raquel Hewitt, and Mr. Vivian Scully. The following persons have also been appointed to the Public Investment Management Committee, which is PIMC, which is a government committee, and that's the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Industry, Investment and Commerce, the Minister of Science, Energy, Telecommunications and Transport, the Minister of Education and Youth, the Minister of Agriculture, Fisheries and Mining, the Minister without portfolio in the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation, the Minister without portfolio in the Office of the Prime Minister, Senator Dana Morris Dixon, the Financial Secretary, the Managing Director of the Development Bank of Jamaica, as well as several other internal persons from ministries, agencies, and departments. We also have some travel that was approved by Cabinet. We have, some of them have passed, but we will just run through some of them. For example, the 3rd Regional Seminar on Social Development, which was held in Chile, and that was the Minister of Labor in June, as well as the 53rd regular session of the General Assembly of the Organization of American States. This was held in Washington, D.C., and it was attended by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade. There was also a high-level ministerial event dubbed Transforming Agri-Food Systems to Achieve the 2030 Agenda, harnessing the potential of SIDS, LDCs, and LLDCs, which was from June 29 and July 1 to 7, and that was attended upon by representatives of the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries. We also had the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States high-level ministerial event in Georgetown, Guyana, in June. That's exactly June 27, that was attended by representatives of the Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries and Mining, and also preparatory and joint meeting of Ministers of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade of the Central American Integral Systems and the Caribbean Community, and this was held in Belize, attended by representatives of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Finally, I would like to announce some contracts that were approved by Cabinet. There was the approval of $1.3 million to EY Services for the provision of consulting services for Phase 4 of the Compensation Review Salary Structure Project by the Ministry of Finance. And this was approved on a recommendation of the Infrastructure Committee after going through the respective procurement processes. Cabinet also approved the award of a contract for the procurement and distribution of textbooks, and I suspect Minister Williams will give us some more details on that. And this was under the Ministry of Education's National Textbook Loan Scheme for the academic year 2023 to 2024, and in keeping with an endorsement from the Public Procurement Commission, this was to the tune of $152 million to Carlong Publishers Limited. We also had another in the same category, and this was for grades 7 to 11 textbooks for secondary level schools island-wide under the Ministry of Education's textbook loan scheme for 2023-2024, and this was endorsed by the Public Procurement Commission to the tune of $273,833,000 Jamaican dollars to Kingston Bookshop Limited. And finally, in that series was an $83 million approval to Book Wizard Limited for textbooks for grades 7 to 11 under the ministry's National Textbook Loan Scheme. We also had an approval to the Planning Institute of Jamaica for the provision of an expandable database of the transaction information comprising 250,000 scanned loose leaf files and 300,000 application index cards for the integration with the e-titling software system, which is being procured by the National Land Agency. This approval was to the tune of $450,000 to Sofenji SP Zo, and this was approved by Cabinet. I will not go through much more as we have a long day, but these will be published for all to see, as well as what I did not mention. We have 3 presentations today. We have one from the Ministry of Education to update us on several new developments in the education sector, including the early procurement of textbooks for our students, which is something that we should all be proud of. Great work done by the Ministry of Education and the Minister and her team. We also have updates from the Minister of Foreign Affairs, particularly the meetings that we had in CARICOM and several decisions that have come out of that. And also, last but not least, we have a presentation from the National Works Agency to give us a very important update on the South Coast Highway improvement projects. The Prime Minister would have made some decisions recently, and the National Works Agency will be executing those decisions. I think I will invite Minister Williams to be the first to attend up on the platform to give her presentation. Minister Williams. Thank you.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Minister Morgan. Let me acknowledge colleague ministers who are here, the team from the Ministry of Education and Youth. Special acknowledgement to Permanent Secretary Acting, Dr. Maureen Dwyer, Dr. Kassan Troop, Chief Education Officer Acting. Let me say good morning as well to the NWA team. And I will begin by saying, even as we close, the 2022-2023 school year and celebrate our students at the Central Ministry, the preparation for the next school year kicked into high gear with the regional back-to-school conference yesterday with board chairs, principals, education officers, other regional heads. Just yesterday, Region 6, which is St. Catherine, held their back-to-school conference. Today, we'll have Region 7, which is Clarendon, also with their back-to-school conference. And we will see the other regions into next week having their back-to-school conferences as well. Today, our school nurses are meeting for their 19th annual general meeting and health conference under the theme, Our School Nurses, Our Future, bridging the gap between health and education to obtain optimum health and wellness for all. We have approximately 140 school nurses in our high schools. And I want to take this opportunity to remind our parents about the immunization records that are required for the start of the new school year for those students who are registering for the first time. Additionally, for parents of grade 7 students, a reminder that there's a requirement for medicals as well for those students. We are happy to report that our summer academy got underway this week. We have 57 schools across the regions that are in operations. We are expected to impact some 7,800 students in the face-to-face modality and another 20,000 plus students in the virtual space. The difference between the face-to-face and the virtual: for the face-to-face, those are students who need support in terms of literacy and numeracy. And in the virtual space, those are students who are almost at mastery, still needing a little bit of support to get them into mastery. So we are expecting to reach approximately 28,000 students for our summer school this year. It's a lot targeted that it's been in the past, but we are seeing where our targeted interventions are producing results. I turn now to school furniture and textbooks. This year, the budget allocation is $2 billion for textbooks, and e-books continue to be a part of the mix. I will just highlight where we are in the process. So for our grades 1 to 4 math textbook, distribution will commence July 24th. For grade 5 to 6, Rediscovering Maths, distribution already begun in several parishes. Distribution is expected to be completed by July 20th. Also for grade 4 to 6, English, distribution already started, expected to be completed by July 30th. First steps in science, again for grades 4 to 6, distribution started. So too, social studies for grades 4 to 6, distribution already started. For grades 7 to 11, we're happy to say as well, distribution has started there and expected to be completed by July 30th. For information technology, for our grade 11, we have completed the distribution there. In terms of the e-books, for English, grade 7 to 11, the ministry has already received some 11,000 licenses and is in the process of assigning the e-books to schools and to the respective students. CSEC accounts, Principles of Business and Office Administration e-books, also for grade 11. These will be distributed shortly. We are in receipt of the license. Foods and economics textbooks, distribution started and will be completed by July 14th. This is not an exhaustive list. The point is that distribution has begun for our textbooks in the system. And we're happy in terms of the ability to be ahead of the curve this year. And we will continue, obviously, as we go ahead to ensure that we continue to streamline the arrival and distribution of textbooks in the school years ahead. In terms of school furniture, we have 2,100 pieces of student desks and chairs and 100 pieces of teachers' desks in stock and ready for distribution. Production will continue, and we expect that Brownstown High School will deliver 600 students' desks and chairs by July 15th, another 600 pieces by August 15th. Veertech will provide 1,000 pieces by July 15th as well, and August 15th. Mouchette High and Alphonso Davis High are also expected to provide 1,000 pieces, again by August 15th. And then Belmont Academy and St. Andrew Tech will provide 2,500 each. Additionally, we have 12 schools engaged in doing furniture repairs of approximately 8,000 pieces of furniture. We continue to believe in and support our schools making and delivering the desks and chairs for students and teachers. And as you know, quality assurance is provided by the Bureau of Standards. And that wraps up the report for this morning. We do have here technical persons when we get to the question and answer session. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Minister Williams, for that important update. We will now have Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, the Honorable Senator Kamina Johnson-Smith, to make her presentation.
Thank you, Minister. Allow me to also greet my colleague, Minister Williams, Mr. Hunter and his team from the NWA supporting MDA's of the Ministry of Education and Youth, my wonderful permanent secretary, and of course, Director of Caribbean and Americas, Mrs. Rose Howell, who joins us together with P.S. Dwyer. Ladies and gentlemen of the media and the public joining us online and through traditional media, good morning. I am pleased to join you at another post-cabinet briefing to update the country on the work of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade. And in particular today, I'd like to focus on the recently concluded 45th meeting of CARICOM heads of government. And I regret that I'm only now doing it, but I was a bit under the weather on return and had to be managing doctor's orders with some national responsibilities and therefore didn't get to report as quickly as I might. So I thank Minister Morgan for allowing me the opportunity here. As always, I was honored to support Prime Minister Holness as he led Jamaica's delegation to this important meeting from the 3rd to the 5th of July in Port of Spain, Trinidad and Tobago. Interestingly, the meeting was chaired by the Honorable Roosevelt Skerrit, the Prime Minister of Dominica, who now is chair of conference, and it was of particular significance as it celebrated the 50th anniversary of CARICOM. And why it was that it was held in Trinidad on express agreement between Prime Minister Skerrit and Prime Minister Rowley was because, of course, the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas was signed in Trinidad and Tobago, and it was therefore felt that it would be important for heads at this 50th anniversary to return to Chaguaramas, where they indeed planted trees, which we hope will be there offering shade in another 50 years, and of course allowed for the historical significance of this juncture to be highlighted. The conference received several special guests, which I think highlighted the importance that the institution of CARICOM holds internationally. We were graced with the presence of the Secretaries General of the United Nations, the Commonwealth, the OAS, and the ACS, as well as, of course, the heads of other international organizations, the head of the FAO for the region. Prime Minister Han Duck-soo of South Korea was present, President Kagame, Secretary Blinken was present, together with the minority head of Congress, Hakeem Jeffries, and a congressional delegation. We had meetings also with Senator Chris Dodd, who leads on the Haiti issue, and several representatives of the State Department, and the minister responsible for the Caribbean from the UK, as well as Assistant Foreign Minister of China, Hua Chunying, was also present, and meetings were held across the piece. You can get a sense then of the level of ceremony and the level of engagement which was present. And again, I say that because where persons ask whether CARICOM is relevant, the fact is that there are, that internationally, many countries, many institutions, many regional groupings have become used to dealing with the body as opposed to 14 or 15 individual relationships, and accordingly it does hold quite a bit of relevance insofar as the international community is concerned. I just wanted to update on a few of the outcomes. And in particular, of course, the first, and I would call it the most remarkable outcome, would be the agreement of conference to work towards the free movement of all CARICOM nationals by March 31st, 2024. So that those who wish to exercise this right to move freely would be able to remain indefinitely in another member state of the community. This is a massive agreement, and for those of you who remember where we're even coming from 2016 and beyond, and even our recent concerns in respect of movement to Belize, you'd recognize that CARICOM heads taking a decision to say that persons, that CARICOM nationals must be able to move and remain indefinitely in brother and sister countries within the region is a massive move in terms of political will. I want to also just remind And this has been something that Jamaica has always taken from this administration took office. We have said, you have heard me say it, and I reminded heads that they had heard me say it too on more than one occasion, that the ability to move freely, the ability to work freely in other CARICOM countries is the most fundamental way in which the average CARICOM national can experience CARICOM in its fullness. And therefore, all the things that we had been working for, simplification of the skilled movement certification, recognition of security workers, domestic workers, and agricultural workers, expanding the category of workers that are recognized in other CARICOM countries to include those which were of most relevance to Jamaica nationals seeking to move, the ability to engage in the rights when you marry. We still continue to be working through some of our issues with couples who live in Trinidad, who are raising families in Trinidad, but have not been able to access all rights. So we raise the fact that there is quite a bit of work that is left to be done to make this real, and that it cannot be a mere political announcement, that there is not only the fact and requirement of amendment of the treaty, because the treaty does not provide for indefinite stay, and those who follow these matters closely, recognizing that Shanique Mairi has qualified the right of movement to say that you must be able to support yourself, you must be able to prove that you can support yourself when you move, you must be not a threat to national security or public order, and there can also, of course, be health restrictions that are put in place. We all know Jamaica has strong yellow fever. We're one of the 3 countries in the world that are yellow fever and malaria free. We are very serious about our health restrictions, and we continue to enforce those, as do other countries who have those strong protections in place. The pandemic taught us a lot, and other countries have upgraded their systems in that regard as well. So the treaty will not only have to be amended, but domestic legislation and administrative processes will have to be put in place. And Jamaica was quite clear that it will be important that we do the work that is required, not only to make an announcement to celebrate 50, but to actually make it a reality. The timeline is ambitious, but I believe that there is a commitment to press. We will see whether the practicalities require any movement, but we will continue the work internally at the technical level to examine all the various steps that are needed. One of the issues, which is of course relevant to Ministry of Education present here, are the contingent rights which attach to someone moving to live indefinitely. If you're moving and you're moving with your family, one would imagine you would have to be concerned about schooling and health. Does the right attach the right to free primary and secondary? Does it attach to emergency health care or all health care? These are things which have to be determined. So we welcome the agreement. We were part of the agreement, but Jamaica did also make quite clear that these things have to be worked out, and you will see those things reflected in the decision when it is circulated, because what we want is for a decision to be implementable. We want it to be something that is worthy of the 50th, and that it is something on which we have been working since we took office. So we are very pleased with the progress, but also very seized of the nuts and bolts that have to be put in place to make it workable, meaningful, and helpful to our average citizens who want to work. I think the fact, and I just want to make this clear in case I hadn't made it clear, that we will be removing all, and this is not effective now, so I want to remember that. I want everyone to remember that this is not effective now. The timeline is March 31, 2024. That the requirement for skills certificates for the different areas, I don't know if you realize we spent 2 years working on the definitions of agricultural workers, domestic workers, and health workers, but we have now agreed that the certificate will no longer be required. So once you have your qualifications from your national institution, you can move and work, and that will simplify things for citizens who seek to offer their services. People will come here, our citizens will go elsewhere. There are no limitations put in place, and this in terms of the concept that's being worked on, in terms of population size that will be allowed to move. We know, for example, Antigua recognizes that the Jamaican population is close to the size of the indigenous population, and therefore this is something that they have always noted as a matter of concern. They have naturalized a lot of Jamaicans, maybe 20,000 Jamaicans in the last iteration, and they have a population of 80,000 people. So the movement is a significant issue for countries, and that this decision was taken is therefore quite massive, and we look forward to continuing to share as we work through on the technical side of these matters. I wanted to also share that in terms of the CARICOM Single Market and Economy heads agreed to set a timeline for bringing a regional capital market into being, and this is again quite important, more for other countries than for Jamaica, because our capital markets are the most developed within the region. But it is an area in which Jamaica shares our technical expertise, and one which will not only offer growth for Jamaican businesses, but will offer growth for other businesses wishing to participate in a higher level of financial services and exchange, and it will result in growth to all our economies. On the matter of external trade, persons again who follow these issues will recall that Prime Minister Holness chairs the committee, the Prime Ministerial Subcommittee of Heads on External Trade Negotiations, and the committee met earlier this year, scheduled to meet again in 2 months' time, to look at the matter of where we are post-COVID, and how it is that we deal with the matter of trade important to small, open, and vulnerable economies such as ours. And he recommended several actions to be taken by the trade unit within the CARICOM Secretariat, one being to review and take a new strategy entirely with our traditional partners, with the existing hemispheric agreements. So with the US and Canada, we will focus on trade in services, as well as expanding the scope of goods which are covered, to ensure that we are in fact providing for preferential trade in goods which are relevant to our producers, as well as in services, which comprises maybe 70% of regional GDP. So that we're saying that we need to be more empirical in how we approach external trade and our existing and or non-traditional arrangements. That agreement was, or rather the recommendation was endorsed by heads, together with an endorsement to conduct a full review of our trade performance as a region, so that we can be more empirical in our review and updating of existing agreements before we move on to new agreements, and that would include agreements which exist with CARICOM and DOMREP and Costa Rica, as well as Venezuela, but we know that the latter is impacted by sanctions, and accordingly it is not number one on the list. It will fall in the order as we continue to move through the broader issues in that regard. On the matter of Haiti, I wanted to raise the issue of how heads dealt with this matter, because we in fact made far more significant progress in terms of determining as a body of member states what is needed for us to support Haitian-led solutions, and indeed sustainable-led Haitian solutions in their efforts to return to peace and stability. And so I think at this meeting there was demonstrated greater cohesion and greater clarity. All of the heads present, and in fact most if not all visiting guests, commended CARICOM for the work that they have been doing, commended the work of the Eminent Persons Group, and expressed appreciation to the government of Jamaica for hosting in a neutral, safe, and inclusive way the more than 50 stakeholders who came and engaged in Kingston talks and made significant progress in that regard. So the meeting in Port of Spain was able to harness that goodwill and to acknowledge the need, for example, of the immediate creation of a humanitarian and a security stabilization corridor under the mandate of a United Nations Security Council resolution. So heads approved Prime Minister Holness making a presentation to the United Nations Security Council, which he did last week, Wednesday, literally landed, came to the media center, and we got special dispensation for him to present virtually because there were just no flights available for him to be present for the presentation. Presentation was well received, but the critical point to take away is that heads endorsed Prime Minister Holness, recognizing that immediate security assistance is needed for a humanitarian and security stabilization corridor, and that a UN Security Council resolution is needed in order to support a return to peace and stability in Haiti. So for some time we've been discussing the issue of political versus security and whether there should be international security assistance provided, and CARICOM itself had not come to a final CARICOM position. At this meeting they agreed that we were at a stage where it was necessary as part of the solution, and that therefore is important to recognize. It is doubly important to recognize because the Eminent Persons Group is actually arriving in Haiti today for their next round of stakeholder consultations, which will take place over the next 3 days. So we were able to have broader discussions that set this context, including recognizing with the Prime Minister of Haiti confirming his position that he will not seek re-election, so that the support of stability in Haiti and governmental engagement in respect of Haiti is not seeking to establish a particular regime, but is seeking to provide a framework of engagement with the existing Prime Minister in place based on his agreement not to run again for election, and also based on some of the announced agreements which he made here in Kingston, including the expansion of the High Transition Council membership to be more inclusive, and a reshuffling of his government, again, to be more inclusive and representative, to allow for a transition to take place in a way that builds trust and confidence, recognizing that security is also an important aspect for there to be the holding of free, fair, and credible elections. I will close on the point of segueing to the fact that the media is aware that 37 Haitian nationals arrived in Portland by boat earlier this week, and to confirm that they are currently receiving attention to their immediate needs by the relevant arms of the government of Jamaica. Ministry of National Security leads on these matters. They are acknowledged at this point as illegal entrants, and therefore, but they're housed in comfortable circumstances. I understand the Ministry of National Security will share that information as to the exact location at the point that they see fit. The Ministry of Health and Wellness, I understand, has now completed their health checks, health examinations, and everyone there is in good health. They're being fed and taken good care of, and further decisions and announcements will be made in terms of the ultimate treatment of this body of persons in due course. So I just share that to say that it's with the Ministry of National Security as lead on this point, given the manner in which they entered and the manner in which they are now present in Jamaica. So thank you very much for your time and attention. I hope the matters were of interest to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. I'm going to ask, before we have the National Works Agency, that both Minister Williams and Minister Johnson-Smith attend upon the platform so we can take questions in relation to those two ministries, and then afterwards we'll have the presentation from the National Works Agency. Ministers?
Are we to choose minister, or someone will moderate? Okay.
Morning, Ministers. Hal Shane Burke, Radio Jamaica News. To the Minister of Education, 2 questions. There have been reports that some teachers are still awaiting payments for summer school from last year. Have those issues been resolved? Second question. How is the ministry dealing with students who are placed in schools far away from their home or their zones? Because I know of a case where a child who lives in St. Anne has been placed at a school in St. Thomas. How are we dealing with those to ensure that there are no anomalies going forward?
Oh, all right, and for those 2 questions?
I'd like to also advise members of the media that we also have members of the support teams from both ministries in the audience who will also assist in providing information as well. Minister Williams.
Right, thank you. And on the issue of payment for summer school, I know that our permanent secretary has been dealing with this, so I'll ask her to respond. And with regards to placement of students, I know Dr. Troop is integrally involved in those issues when they come to our attention. So I'll ask you to answer as well. Yes.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the question. It did come to my attention that some of our teachers were not paid, and we're currently in the process of doing an inventory. What we found out so far is that there are some anomalies and some misunderstandings by some of our teachers as to whether the money was placed in their account or the ministry did not pay them. So what we're doing now is to surface our records at the ministry and to get into the records of the teachers at their schools and asking them to look into their accounts to make sure we can reconcile where we are. So that's where we are in the process, but we will give updates as necessary. Yes?
I understand that the number is not that significant, so could you give us an understanding of the quantum generally?
I believe where we have the highest numbers reported is Region 3 and Dr. True, Region 4, right. But in many of the regions, we're talking about 4 teachers, 6 teachers, and so on. But we're doing the reconciliation now.
And there are 7 regions?
And there are 7 regions.
So 4 to 5 in 7 regions, you can make
in about 5 of our regions, the numbers are below 10. Okay. But and in others, the numbers are more.
And this is out of a total of about 25,000 teachers?
I don't think so many of them participated in the summer program, really.
Thank you very much, Faith.
Right.
Good morning, ministers. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning to
I'd like to introduce Dr. Kassan Troop, who is the acting CEO of the Ministry of Education and Youth.
Thank you. With respect to our students who are placed far away from home, we have a procedure in place in all our regions. As long as it is brought to our attention and we look at the grade of the students, the rank of the student in the exams, we dialogue with our principals. And I can tell you, they have been very facilitating. Whenever we have a challenge with proximity, with family concerns, like a parent would come to say, all my children went to Wolmer's Boys, and my other son was placed at Arden. Can you assist us in getting this child down to Wolmer's Boys because of dropping off issues, transportation issues, movement of family? And our principals do work with us. So if you'd be kind enough to give us that information for that one child that you're aware of, we will be very happy. We have been working through those things. And in our natural placement policy, especially for our PATH students, that is something we look out for, and we make sure that if it is that they are manually placed, we place them near to their homes for the purpose of ease of movement and for cost benefits.
Dr. Troop, is there any information you can give members of the public in the various regions as to how they reach out to the regional offices to get assistance in this matter?
Yes, so parents, if it is that you have any concerns, as you have done over the years, and I must say, we are basking in this year, Minister, the overflow has not been so much. This year, because of the improvement in our performance all across our schools, we have seen a kind of acceptance, wide acceptance of where students have been placed. No parent came to say that I think my child was unfairly placed. Normally we have that. We have parents who come to say, I want to see the scripts, and we have to pull the records and we have to show them where the student is ranked or outranked. We have not had that this year. Parents have been comfortable with where their students have been placed. But if it is that you have concerns, parents, please report to the regional offices. We have 7 regional offices. We have in Old Harbour, we have in St. Anne, Brownstown, Montego Bay, Kingston, right across this country, Portland. And we are available to serve you. That's why we are there. And I can tell you, it is not an issue of lack of spaces in our secondary schools. It may mean you want a particular space, but this year, we have spaces available in our secondary schools. For the most part, we have roughly 40,000 spaces when we do our space audit across all our secondary schools. And we have additional spaces in our private high schools. This year we only placed 35,000 plus students, so we do have spaces. So it is not a situation in Jamaica at this time that we cannot place all our primary school students transitioning to grade 7 in a high school. Spaces are available. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Minister Kamina Johnson-Smith, what is the government's policy as it relates to Haitians landing in light of the current situation that is in Haiti? And second question, you had, last time you were here, you mentioned that there was a situation being investigated relating to Jamaican migrants to Belize. Has there been any update on that?
The second question first. There has been no further update. The Belizean government has not taken any further steps in respect of Jamaicans moving. And while we continue to engage with our international partners generally in monitoring the movement, and we're still awaiting information from PICA in terms of our confirmed numbers. The movement, I think, in respect of persons transiting Mexico and Panama have reduced because of a very strenuous imposition of mechanisms, I would say, control mechanisms for passage through the Darien Gap in Central America, so that on the US, Panama, Mexico side of cooperation, and including with Belize, the external partners, the transit country partners and the US have been taking very strong measures which seem to be reducing the movement of people and their incentive. I think also people understanding that the rules in the US have changed now, and when they enter illegally and are deported, which many of them are, that they are then banned from even applying for whether a regular visitor's visa or an immigrant visa. So families can no longer file. If you had been filing, if someone was filing for you and you made this misstep, there is now a 5-year ban on your making any such step, that people are taking more careful thought around the steps. So the situation has not worsened for us so far as we are aware. There have been no imposition of visa restrictions, which I had shared with the public was my concern, that where we have visa-free access to Mexico and Panama, I was concerned that with the additional outflow, that those countries might reconsider their treatment of Jamaican nationals in that manner. Thankfully, they have not, and we have remained engaged with them in that regard, and we trust and hope that this will remain the same. In terms of Haitian nationals, we have not taken a fixed policy position in respect of Haitians' arrivals in Jamaica. At this point in time, we know that we are creatures of international law, and we are always guided by that in terms of rules of asylum and refugee status. There has been no claim made in any of that either category by the persons who have arrived, and therefore they are being treated as illegal entrants because this is the capacity within which they have arrived. The matter will be discussed further, but at this time there is no overarching position that is taken in respect of Haitian arrivals in Jamaica at this time, other than as we are guided by international law and our domestic laws as they stand.
I think we have a question from Arthur Hall, is it? Oh, sorry. My apologies. Go forward.
Good morning. Mark Bantro from 18 Degrees North. My question is to Minister Johnson Smith regarding the...
Hold on for me a second. I think your mic may be muted or something.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Sorry. So my question is regarding the Petro-Caribe agreement. So it is my understanding that in 2019, following U.S. sanctions, Jamaica gave up on an agreement that was extremely beneficial in terms of getting oil from Venezuela. And so my question is, what did Jamaica get in return from the United States in exchange for giving up on this agreement?
Just as a context, Minister, that question was asked last week of Minister Vaz, who expressed that he was unaware of any such thing, but he referred to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So I suspect that's why that question is being repeated this week again.
Thank you. I note with interest your particular phrasing and contextualization of that question, which seems to presume various pejoratives that I probably won't enter into and won't take offense on behalf of the sovereign government and people of Jamaica, who have a right and obligation to take steps in defense of our people, and who took actions in 2019 to protect our petroleum industry and our energy security by ensuring that sanctions, which had the possibility of shutting down a refinery and ensuring that we had no electricity to power our homes and our schools and our factories and our offices and our government, that we took a position that we would enter into an arrangement to nationalize shares, which took place through an appropriate sovereign legislative process through Parliament, where the matter was debated in both houses transparently, and which has been addressed and been the subject of other legal processes. There has been no quid pro quo, and I'm sorry, but I do take offense on behalf of the sovereign government and people of Jamaica that it would be thought that we could take a decision to protect our energy security on the basis of a quid pro quo. Sanctions exist, they continue to exist because there are positions that are held in respect of the legitimacy of the government and its approach to elections in that country of Venezuela. And those have been taken into consideration by not only other countries, but by the banking systems on which we rely to do commerce and to function as a country. So in sum, no quid pro quo, and we did not give up a right, nor did we give up a right in respect of anything. I hope that the information which I've shared with you will inform your further consideration of the issue.
Just another question regarding Russian fuel imports this time. There have been several reports.
My apologies, but you did ask that question to Mr. Vaz last week, who answered it. Minister Vaz is the minister with responsibility for Petrojam, which imports fuel in Jamaica. He's also the policy head through the cabinet for those matters. The Minister of Foreign Affairs would not deal with the approval of importation of fuel through Petrojam. And he did answer last week to say that no such decision was made, no policy decision of that nature was made.
It's a slightly different question.
Okay, no problem.
My question is more so regarding the reports that Russian fuel is coming to Jamaica. Are you at all concerned that this might be
No, I have to stop. Minister
I'm not
Vaz
aware of
last
any
week.
reports.
Yes,
I'm not
Minister
aware
Vaz
of,
said it.
I'm not aware of any reports other than reports from your agency. So I'm not aware of any Russian fuel coming into Jamaica.
There are no, and I want to reiterate it, Minister Vaz said last week that no approval has been given by the government to import Russian fuel in Jamaica. It is not a fact. It does not exist. It did not happen. Thank you very much.
And I'll just reiterate the fact that the government of Jamaica continues to condemn the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. We continue to believe in and to support domestically and internationally the principles of sovereignty, territorial integrity, and freedom from interference from other states. So this is not a position which has changed. We don't have a sanctions regime, as has been indicated previously, other than to recognize UN Security Council sanctions. But we do take actions and are guided where other sanctions affect our national energy, food, or financial security. So I will just state that.
Thank you, Minister. I think we have Mr. Arthur Hall.
Minister Arthur Hall from the Jamaica Observer. The CARICOM meeting, we agreed that we're aiming for next March for the free movement. Have you identified the pieces of legislation which would have to be adjusted in Jamaica? And with the issues that we have with the Chief Parliamentary Council and even the Legislative Committee at Parliament, how can you get those legislation amended and ready to meet March deadline?
Right. So the issue is actually not going to only be a Jamaica issue. In terms of Jamaica, we are going through the process of recognizing. Clearly, the most important one will be that very same piece of legislation that is in the throne speech awaiting amendment to add the additional 3 categories of workers. That one will have to be amended. Because it deals with the free movement and the free movement regime and movement of skilled workers, regime as it currently exists. So that is a major regime. But we will also have to be looking at customs, and we will have to be looking at immigration, and we will have to be looking at the rights which attend in terms of the administrative side of access to school and health. We will have to be looking at what it requires to enter. And this is not, again, it's not Jamaica. So we have passports, we're moving towards NIDS. The OECS has a national ID, which is not secured by biometrics. Barbados has their own NIDS with biometrics. Does the same, will Barbadian be able to travel with their NIDS, but will someone else be required to have a passport? Will everyone? These things have to be worked out. So heads embraced a grand political will to say, let us move towards this. It's been 50 years we've been talking about this thing. We have to press to move everything forward. As I said earlier, it is an ambitious timeline, I think, that has been set. But I think the sense was that if a timeline is not set, then efforts won't be made to work towards a goal. And the sense is to say, all of the countries that have, for example, some of the double verification process that has affected many Jamaicans seeking to work elsewhere, that will be removed. So we see that as a win for our people who want to move and work in other islands. And similarly for persons who are coming here. So we have security verification and other things that it will be easier all across the piece. Will we make 24? I cannot lay my head on the block to say we will make March 31, 2024, but it is an admirable goal, and it is one which Jamaica supports. So.
Thank you, Minister. We have another question.
Good morning. Mahiri Stewart here from Nationwide News. 2 questions to Minister Williams. First question is health-related. Both of them are health-related, but as it regards Dr. Tufton's reminder yesterday that COVID-19 is still very much on the rise in Jamaica in certain areas, is there any worry from the education sector, what with children outside of school right now, kind of all over the place for summer vacation, that coming back into the school system in September, there won't be a potential outbreak at a school? If there anything being put in place to make sure that come September, there won't be a potential breakout?
All right, so having made that announcement, meaning the Minister of Health and Wellness, we will immediately convene a meeting with the Ministry of Health and Wellness. As we did during COVID, we had many meetings to sit down to lay out now what the protocols will be going forward for schools, for education. We have obviously to take that announcement very seriously, and that we will be doing. Good thing we're in the summer break now, so that allows us time to prepare for the next school year and even during the summer.
Okay. And my second question would be, we received a report yesterday from a disgruntled parent saying that their child was unable to get through to a school that they passed for because they're wheelchair bound and the school wasn't able to accommodate for the student. Is there anything, or is there anything already being put in place for the schools across Jamaica as it regards incorporating something for students that may need extra accommodation to also take part in school?
Sure, I'll begin and probably Dr. Troop can give me some details, but I know we've made concerted effort to ensure access for wheelchairs, to ensure that our classrooms are inclusive. We provide support for children experiencing disabilities. And to the extent that there's a particular school and we don't have that facility, we will have it in place for September. Yes.
Thank you. I suspect you may wish to remind post-cabinet about the COVID task force that you had.
During COVID, yes.
And that there's always the possibility
of pulling those people back, re-engaging them, if the data suggests.
I suspect we have exhausted the questions for Minister Johnson-Smith and Minister Williams. I hope that they will stay with us for this important presentation by the National Works Agency. So thank you, ladies. I really appreciate you attending PostCap today. We will now invite Mr. E.G. Hunter, CEO of the National Works Agency, and I suspect you may want one of your colleagues to accompany you. Thank you, Mr. Downer. It is good for you to attend up on the podium. Welcome to Post Cabinet, sir. Yes, thank you very much. Mr. Downer will also associate himself with Mr. Hunter for the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Morgan. Good morning, everyone. Ministers, colleagues, members of the press. First of all, I am E.G. Hunter, not Stephen Shaw. So I don't want to see it on the media tonight that Stephen Shaw has lost his beard. Okay, no. So just to be clear. I indicated to Minister Morgan earlier on that he has tremendous powers because he got me here this morning to do this. Today is actually my 15th wedding anniversary, and I promised my wife that I was going to stay home with her today, cook, clean, wash, iron, and do all that kind of domestic thing. But another type of duty calls, and so I'm here.
We thank your wife for her understanding.
Thank you. Now, we've been asked to make a presentation on the South Coast Rehabilitation Project. And to a certain extent, I suspect that there might be a feeling that we ought to be in somewhat of a defensive mode, and particularly coming after two ministers who are at the tail end, and in cricket parlance, tail end batsmen can't bat. But I would like to suggest that we are, in fact, the opening pair, okay? We do have some good news and some positive news regarding the project. And I think, there is a narrative, I feel, that anything that we do locally must be of a lesser standard. It is simply not true. Isn't it amazing that the government is spending close to $400 million US dollars, and we haven't heard the S word, scandal, yeah? There is no allegation or supposition that anyone is in the till when it comes to the South Coast project. Indeed, and in fact, I'd like to inform that the South Coast project is being implemented in full compliance with all the fiduciary responsibilities that the various entities and agencies of government that have oversight responsibility have imposed on the government. So all the subcontractors have been selected competitively in an open and transparent tender process. All the subcontractors are tax compliant and have been awarded contracts in accordance with their grades. We're audited quite frequently, both by the Auditor General Department as well as the Integrity Commission. So I would just like to put it on the table that in terms of the execution of the project, we're in full compliance with first world standards. Now, do we have some problems? Yes, we do. Are there some things that we could have done better? Certainly, there is. Have there been lessons that we learned? Definitely so. So the presentation I'm about to do will be shared with the media, so the details of which you will have. But Mr. Dona and myself are engineers by profession, and so we are more comfortable with numbers than we are with the verbiage. So I will go through the presentation very quickly. If I miss or gloss over anything, you will be provided with a copy. Now, the South Coast project represents perhaps the largest integrated infrastructure project being done by any government at any one point in time. Now, of course, there were projects before. For example, the JD program, which was $400 million US. But again, that was not a particular project in a location. It had several locations island-wide. This is an integrated project running from Harborview in one extreme to Port Antonio. We have subdivided the project into 16 components, which means that the work will be conducted in 16 different physical locations. Currently, we are working in 11 different locations. And obviously, that has posed a challenge. To have sufficient boots on the ground, to have sufficient coordination, to have sufficient oversight in 11 different locations is a challenge. And you might ask the question, why did we choose such an ambitious agenda? The truth is that this program is being funded significantly by a loan from China Exim Bank. And one of the consequences of loans, in particular bilateral foreign loans, is that there's usually an aggressive timeline in which the funds have to be spent, otherwise you lose the funds, and it's a bad mark on the country. So we have had to implement the project in a very aggressive mode, and that in itself does have its consequence. But we are confident in our position that the 2-3 years of discomfort and challenges that we face will shortly be supplanted by 50 years of enjoyment of the infrastructure that we're putting in, because that's a lifespan of the infrastructure that we're putting in. So if you look at the map on the table, you will see on the screen, you will see that the project runs from Harborview all the way to Port Antonio, through Morant Bay, Port Morant, and there is a spur that goes from Morant Bay to Cedar Valley. And that will be assisting the farmers to get their products to market. Let me talk a little bit now about the magnitude and complexity of the works. The SHIP project is an integrated infrastructure development project, and it's one of the most complex that we have undertaken. It is not, ladies and gentlemen, it's not a road project. Indeed, let me be clear. The original contract that was signed for this project was a road-only contract. Very early in the day, we at the NAA petitioned the government to say, listen, if you're going to do a road-only project, you will shortly have to have numerous re-excavation of this road because the underlying water supply network is in poor condition. Now, it so happens, as some of you know, in my previous life, I did have a sojourn in the water industry, so I kind of have intimate knowledge of the state and condition of the water supply infrastructure island-wide. So I was able to leverage that knowledge in the interest of this project, and the government accepted the thesis that we should migrate from a road-only project to what we consider to be a full infrastructure project. So in addition to the road, we're putting in water supply, we're putting in sewage, we're putting in ducts for fiber optic cables to expand the broadband service to the country. We're putting in drains, sidewalks, retaining wall. Indeed and in fact, what the public relates to mostly is paving, carpet. But I'm telling you, that is the last phase of the project. When you see carpet being laid down, that means we have done the heavy lifting already. And it is during the phase of the heavy lifting, the excavation for the pipes and the sidewalks and the drains, that is the phase of the project that is most annoying, because that's when you get the dust and you get the congestion in the traffic and the general dissatisfaction of the motoring as well as the pedestrian public. Now, the upgrade is intended to address drainage issues, as I said before. It will also widen the road to increase the carrying capacity, and it will definitely construct an infrastructure that is more climate resilient. Because one of the characteristics of our coastal towns and roads is that they are so close to the sea that the ravages of sea level rise has been impacting our roadways. So the section of the highway from Harborview to, right now, Harborview to Yallas is actually on brand new alignment, brand new turf, away from the sea. And what that does, it gives you land from the highway down to the sea that now becomes beachfront property. So there is a little method to our madness in terms of what we're doing. But is it easy? Of course it's not. But we do believe in the wisdom of what we are trying to achieve, and we will continue. The magnitude and complexity of the project is highlighted by the next slide. And it tells you that we're trying to lay 110 truckload of material. We're 110,000 truckload of material. We're placing 500,000 cubic meters of base course material, 1.5 million square meters of asphalt paving, installation of 260 meters of water and sewer lines, construction of 9 new bridges along the corridor, 10 corrugated steel, construction of 10 corrugated steel pipes, construction of 44 box culvert, 307 imported high-density polyethylene pipe culverts, construction of approximately 14 kilometers of retaining wall at a maximum height of 12 meters, that's 40 feet, and installation of some 141 kilometers of fiber optic cable. So you can see, ladies and gentlemen, that the undertaking is rather ambitious, and it is complex, and it is challenging. The next slide is a pictorial of some of the works, some of the new bridges that were built, the mass of concrete that we've been placing. Drainage is an important part of the consideration here, because again, it is well known that most of our roads in Jamaica were not design roads. They were donkey tracks that we paved over in subsequent years. So we now have an opportunity to actually design the road in the proper engineering parlance. And so the roads have the right camber so that when the rain falls, it only stays on the surface for the intended time period, and then it flows to drains, which takes it away. So all of this goes into the design and the construction of the infrastructure. Next slide, please. The next slide up will be one. Oh, there was a slide that showed, could you go back to the one, Andrew? Yeah. So this is what the public likes. Yeah, this slide, carpet. And in fact, every time we pave a section, the project team sends me photographs of paving, and I send the photographs on to Prime Minister and Minister Warmington and everyone who is involved, because paving is a recognition and acknowledgement that we are getting there. So I'm very pleased whenever I get the pictures on paving. Now, where are we now with this project? And I think that is what most people want to know. Tranche 1 of the project, as I indicated before, the project is subdivided into 15 local packages and 1 package being done by Czech itself. So that's 16 discrete packages. We are currently working on 11, which means that there are 5 more to be done. Of the 11 packages that we're working on, the segment from Harborview to Yallas, that's 17.4 kilometers. That segment is intended to be completed by the end of August. And that is your classic highway section with 4 lanes, Jersey bar down the middle for safety, and it has all the fandangles, the fiber optic cables, the water supply, everything is there. From Yallas all the way to Port Antonio, we go back on the existing alignment, and we're doing the road improvement. So the design and construction of that first segment is different from what we're doing from Yallas into Port Antonio. But it is my understanding that the government's intention is to progressively build out the remainder of the highway component until you get to Port Antonio, because that is already designed. But because of budgetary consideration, we're just doing Harborview to Yallas now as phase 1, and then that will continue to be done progressively. So package 8, 10, and 14 have reached substantial completion. In fact, one of the unfortunate consequences of the work we're doing, and you ask the question, what is it that defines our progress? Regrettably, what defines our progress is the section from Yallas to Port Antonio, because that's where most people drive. But if you were to go on the segment from Harborview to Yallas, you will see that of the 17 kilometers, 14.4 is done. So, I mean, it's almost done. The only section that remains would be the little section in Bull Bay. So If it is that you want a definition, what is it that defines the project, and you go on that segment, you say everything is fine. The segment from Morant Bay to Cedar Valley is also substantially complete. And if that were the segment that defines the project, then everyone would say we are heroes. Regrettably, it just so happens that the segment from Yallas into Morant Bay, we've had problems on that segment, and regrettably, that segment tends to define the project. But we have taken some management decisions which we think will cauterize whatever problems we're having on that segment. And so we think that, well, our program is that by the end of August, we will have substantial completion for segments 8, 10, and 14, as well as from Harborview to Yallas. And
some of the discrete sections.
These are discrete sections. So remember what we did, we divided. And again, right, the locations. Yes, yeah, I understand, yeah. And again, the segments are not contiguous, because when the project was designed, we did the economic analysis, and the economic analysis pointed us to the segments that are most profitable, and so we decided to do those segments first. But we will provide you the, Andrew, can you recite the geographic areas for?
From Yallas Bridge to Port Antonio, it goes continuous, package 1 through to 13. And then from Morant Bay up into Cedar Valley, it's split into 2 packages, packages 14 and 15. Mm-hmm. So that defines it. So when you say package 1, you're talking about Yallas Bridge. Package 13 is in Port Antonio.
Okay. So each of these packages does have a geographic reference which we can give. Challenges. Regrettably, the challenges and the impact of these challenges on the public tends to be what makes the news. And that's understandable. In our business, we really don't expect to get a pat on the back. It's quite often a pat on the back usually has a dagger in it. So, we take our blows as we go along. But the COVID pandemic did have a significant impact on the project. There were areas in St. Thomas that were quarantined. We couldn't do any work there. So that has had an impact. Land acquisition is another major concern. Mr. Johnson Smith is an attorney by profession. And the land acquisition legislation which we have is a 1947 piece of legislation. And so we are acquiring land the same way that we have been from 1947. There's been no innovation. And usually, in a perfect world, we would have acquired the land for the project before we start the construction. Regrettably, the government does not have that facility. So we start acquiring land once you get into the contract. So we're always chasing after land to move the work forward. And there are some very, very entrenched challenges in land acquisition. And understandably so, because most land, the government acquires land under the principle of eminent domain, which gives a state the right to take private property. And in some location, you do it and you don't compensate. In our situation, we have to do compensation. And so there is the need for a balance between an individual's right to own property and enjoy property and the government's right to acquire that property whenever the government needs it for a public purpose. And so it's a delicate balance. So we can't just go on a property and say, well, my project is behind schedule, move out, We have to go through the legislative process. The other thing, too, is that the law as it now stands only allows the NLA to deal with the owner of the property. And most of the properties are not occupied by the owner. So the owner is somebody who's in England and the relatives live on the property. And so there has to be one transaction with the owner, another transaction with the occupier. And even when you've concluded the transaction with the owner and the occupier, you can't just go and throw them on the street. We've had cases where money has been paid, everything is settled, but the lady says, well, the house I was to move into, it's not ready yet, my 3 children. The last thing the government wants is a headline that says, government throws family on the street so it can advance a road project. No, we would never live that down. So there are challenges. Currently, the segment from Harborview to Yallas is encumbered by the Bull Bay police station. Again, on the one hand, the government has an interest in advancing the road construction. That's what we want. But at the same time, the government also has an interest in terms of ensuring the security of the Bull Bay area. And that delicate balance is something that resonates with us, and is one of the challenges that we face. The availability of skilled workers. Again, everybody wants a job, but not everyone is skilled. A man who is proficient at casting a deck for a roof on a house cannot transfer that same skill to casting a deck for a culvert. It's a different skill set. And so what we find as well, especially with 15 packages, with 10, 11 packages going on simultaneously, there's tremendous competition for the skill set, which in itself is in short supply in the area. Moving along, as we all know, the utilities use the roadway, the right-of-way, to transport their product and service. While we as a government and part of government will address the water supply with the support of the NWC, the JPSCO is an independent private entity largely. JPSCO has to relocate their poles for us to have access to the entire carriageway. For JPSCO to relocate their poles, they have to shut off the power. But JPSCO is a regulated utility. It can't just go and shut off the power just to please me. The Office of Utilities Regulation has to preside over the frequency of outage and the duration of outage. And so the complexity of working all these parts does have an impact on the project. Suffice it to say that in terms of project coordination, meetings, Lime is involved because of their infrastructure, Digicel, JPSCO, NWC, all the agencies of government. So in truth and in fact, it is an all-of-government undertaking, and there are many moving parts that we have to keep track of. One of the most annoying feature of what we're doing is traffic congestion. Now, a normal roadway that would obtain in the country at a traffic load of about 7,500 vehicles per day, that would be about the optimum level of most of our roads for a two-lane road. We're working on corridors now, ladies and gentlemen, carrying 14,000 vehicles per day. So it is already saturated. Now try to lay a water main and test that water main along a corridor with 14,000 vehicles and heavy trucks carrying aggregate from St. Thomas quarries. while people want to go about their normal business. It's not easy. So that also is one of the issues that we face. This picture shows you in the red area JPSCO poles which are still in the carriageway, and of course our discussion with JPSCO continues. And let me go on record as saying that the cooperation and support of all the entities has been, exemplary, and I want that to be understood. But it's just that, it is unreasonable to expect that other people are just going to postpone all of their strategic objective just so to facilitate me. So it takes a lot of negotiation. It does. We're getting there. Czech's intervention. A lot has been made of the fact that Czech has moved in on some of the packages which were originally carved out for local subcontractors. And erroneously, the conclusion has been formed that our local subcontractors are not worthy. Let me go on record as saying that that couldn't be further from the truth. Let me elucidate. The contract for the South Coast Highway Improvement Project is a contract between the government of Jamaica and Czech. It's a parent contract. However, in formulating that contract, the government had a carve-out for local subcontractors. However, the contract for the local subcontractor is between subcontractors and Czech. And Minister Johnson Smith, as you know, the principle of privity of contract limits the extent to which other parties can intervene in that arrangement. Okay. Now, on that project, I'm the engineer, and again, based on FIDI contract and legal precedents, there is a limit to what another person can do in terms of that contractual relationship. I don't want to go into the details of it, but suffice it to say, it is not as easy as me going out there and taking backhoe and doing something. You can't do it because there is an existing contract. However, remember I said in the beginning we had a road-only contract, and the subcontractors were selected largely based on their proficiency as road contractors. In fact, there are 21 grade 1 road contractors in the country, and so we tendered with that cohort. When the government took the decision to add the remaining infrastructure to the road, you literally change the complexity of the undertaking. So the skill set that would be required is no longer just proficiency in road construction, but equally proficiency in waterline construction, sewage construction, whatever. So the local subcontractors had a relatively short time period to upskill. That they could have done by recruiting personnel or using their own personnel or subcontracting. And what we have seen, to the extent that a local subcontractor complemented or supplemented its in-house capability by subcontracting, is the extent to which those were more successful. We also awarded the contract based on price only. It was a price-only contract. The consequence of which is that a price-only contract is an attractive contract from oversight entities, but it's saying you're awarding the work for the least price. The peril that we face in government, if we attempt to award a contract above the least price, people assume that you're going to get a kickback or some nonsense like that. And so there is this burden of guilt whenever we attempt to award a contract other than least price. But it is a decision that we have to make. And so in the new programs we're doing, for example, the CAPEX program, it is no longer a least cost equation, what we're doing. We look at the technical requirements to do with the job. And if you pass that test, then we go to your financial. But I'm telling you, it sounds logical, makes sense, but it doesn't play very well in some circles in terms of people coming into audit and looking, why didn't you award this person? And yeah, so we have that burden. We have that burden to face. So regrettably, in the selection of the local subcontractors, it was just least cost only. And that is one of the reasons. We at the NWA, again, one of the lessons that we learn, and as we go through project implementation, we compare and contrast our previous experience. So on the mid-P program, for example, we did it entirely with in-house personnel for supervision. We discovered very quickly that we didn't have enough boots on the ground. I mean, and people were doubling up to do multiple projects and so on. So we upskill our capabilities by employing Stanley consultants who are world-renowned in terms of roadworks and infrastructure. So we supplemented our in-house capability with services which we have bought from Stanley. We have also embedded some of our own staff with Stanley to have an exchange of knowledge and skill. So the need to constantly upgrade your skill set and your management capability is something that we as an entity are seized with, and it is something that we recommend to the local contracting fraternity. So we're not saying that our local subcontractors are not good, and I want to make that point. But what we're saying is that there is some deficit in some of the operation, and they too need to do as we have done by upskilling their capability. I think I only have one slide. The way forward. As you all know by now, the Prime Minister has issued me an edict to take direct responsibility and supervision for the project. So I will be moving to St. Thomas shortly. And late. And I now have a perfect excuse when my wife says, why are you coming over at 2 o'clock in the morning? I'm coming from St. Thomas. Okay, so that's a good excuse. But again, what it means in reality is that as we get closer to the various deadlines that we have set, we have to increase and improve our vigilance. The notion of supervision is something that needs to be clarified. Under the various contracts, the engineer, which is us, we don't have a legal prerogative to supervise the contractor per se. And again, I know this is not, I've been in Parliament at committees and I've, pains to explain this to a number of persons. And there's a body of law and decisions that speaks to this. What it is that in the contract, the first money we pay a contractor is for the contractor to hire the requisite staff to supervise. It's called the contractor superintendent. And that's a lot of money you pay. And the contractor is supposed to go out and hire the people. What it is that we will do is to ensure that the contractor performs the work in accordance with the contract and to the specification in the contract. In theory, or in law, if a contractor gets a contract, he ought to perform his contract, whether or not there's somebody watching him. Yeah? He warrants, when you look at the contractor warrants to perform the work as set out in the contract, with or without the intervention of another party. But even with that legal comfort, we still are out there, and Stanley and ourselves, working with the contractor, assisting them. At this point in time, we have the commitment of check the main contractor to have a more aggressive role, largely because the contract is between Czech and the government looks to Czech to deliver the product at the end of the day. Czech's relationship with their subcontractors is something that we've also worked on, because at the end of the day, we will not succeed unless all the parties to this contract are in unison. There has been disturbance to the population, especially along the areas where habitation has taken place. The segment from Harborview to Yalas, nobody knew about that because it's just mongoose and that kind of animal that we come across. But from Yalas to Port Antonio, we are mingling with normal people going about their normal business. And there is some friction, there's some natural tension. We think that the heavy lifting is largely over. Most of the construction of the underground infrastructure is completed. We did have a dust problem because, again, traditionally we rely on wetting the surface. But, you know, two things happen. One, an unusually dry period. So when you wet a surface, it evaporates very quickly. And secondly, because of water restriction, we're hard to get water. So we've changed to oiling, which is good. Like this. 5 years from now, when the Auditor General audits, you're going to see there was an overrun on the contract because it changed from water to oil. So I only hope people remember 5 years from now why there was that overrun. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is, in essence, our presentation. I think that the last thing I will say is that the final 5 segments of the project, the government has already signed off on that, and Czech will be doing that 5 themselves. And so all the lessons that we have learned from this portion of the project will be used to influence our modus operandi in the segment to come. So, there are no questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hunter and also Mr. Downer. We will now open the floor to members of the media for questions. I see we have a question from the RGR Communications Group.
Okay. Good morning, Mr. Hunter. My name is Shauna Small. I'm a reporter at the Jamaica Gleaner. My question is in regards to the concerns that have been aired about the local contractors on the work, including from Minister Everald Warmington as well. I want to know, how much of the delays that we've experienced on the projects can be attributed to the local contractors. Also, you mentioned earlier in your presentation that the project has to be completed in a certain time because of a loan from China. What was that timeline that was given by China for the project to be completed? All of it. Thank you.
Okay, so it is a matter of record that the performance of some of the local subcontractors on particular segments that to which they were assigned was not to our satisfaction. And regrettably, that is what makes the news. But there are segments being done by other local subcontractors which we have no problem, and they've been doing extremely well. I would rather, I can think of Morant Bay to Cedar Valley, which has been done by Alcar and Smith Asphalt. Those have gone very well. YP Seaton's component has gone very well. Construction Solution has gone very well. Alcar Construction has gone very well. So if you look at the number, the majority of the local subcontractors have done well. There are, however, a number of local subcontractors who had challenges. And the reason for the challenge that I indicated, from what we have seen, was that they did not have the requisite management infrastructure to be able to undertake the works. In fact, I tell you, one particular subcontractor, S&G, that's known for roadworks, they employed another company, Smith Warner, to manage the project for them. So there are a number of options available to local subcontractors in order for them to upskill. Those who adapted to the new dispensation were the ones that succeeded. Those that didn't adapt or took a long time to adapt are the ones that had problems. But again, the position of the government, while we will call out dissatisfaction with the performance of a particular subcontractor, our contract is with the main contractor. So, I don't go to bed thinking about what I'm going to do about a particular local subcontractor. I go to bed or wake up in the morning, contemplating what I'm going to do with respect to the main contractor, because that is a contractual relationship, okay? And I think in my earlier presentation, I did outline, some of the challenges, moving from a road-only contract is simple. You put on base course and you roll it and you pave it and everybody is happy. When you are laying so main, 3 meters underground and then there's the water, and doing all of that while you're keeping existing service going. Because there's no householder who is going to accept that, oh, my water supply is going to be out for 4 weeks while you're doing this. No. You have to keep the existing service going. They have to have their telephone service. They have to have their electricity. They have to have their water while you are putting in the new infrastructure. Believe me, ladies and gentlemen, that's not an easy task. In other places, they would cordon off an entire area, nobody goes in there, and everybody moves out, and so you have virgin area in which to work. We are trying to do this while people are going about their normal business. The other question you asked was in respect of, the loan period. Okay, so most loans are negotiated by the Ministry of Finance, and there is what's called a terminal disbursement date. And for this particular loan, and with the terminal disbursement date, there is the facility for that to be extended. I can tell you that we have requested an extension. The government is in the process of requesting an extension because the timelines have been affected by things like COVID. So it is our intention to have the entire program completed by 2024. Yeah, that's the program. But what it is that, as we found out with MIDP, if you go slow in the beginning in terms of drawing down the loan, you have to accelerate your level of work in the latter part to catch up, and that's what we're going to do.
Thank you, Mr. Hunter. We have another question.
Yeah, just Mahiri Stewart from Nationwide News. Just to get just a bit more clarity, what can the public expect from E.G. Hunter, the supervisor of the project, as opposed to just E.G. Hunter, the CEO of the NWA?
Or you get 2 for the price of 1. Okay, so one has to be careful that we can't make the entity a one project entity, okay? So the challenge that I will have is that I have to pay a particular amount of attention to the project while still doing what is expected of me for the rest of the organization. Because the man in Westmoreland, do you think the people in Westmoreland give two hoots about South Coast? No. Minister Morgan here, his concern is in his constituency. And I can't say to him, well, you know, I'm busy in St. Thomas, so I can't address your problem. So I have to be ambidextrous. I have to be extend equal facility to the project as I do to the other responsibilities. Is this the first time I'm doing this? No, I've done it all my life. And I am brash enough to suggest that I will succeed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hunter. Do we have any other questions? I think we're running out of time, but we can go ahead with
it's my anniversary.
Okay, Mr. Hunter, you mentioned as well that 11 locations are currently being worked on. Are all those locations being worked on by local contractors?
No.
How many are being worked? 10. Okay.
Thank you very much.
However, just to clarify, to make sure the records. So Czech is working on Harborview Terrace by themselves, and of the 10 that are now being done by local subcontractors, Czech is also intimately involved in some of, I think, 3 or 4 of those, more than they are in the others.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hunter. Thank you very much, Mr. Downer.
Thank you, sir, and thanks to the audience.
Well, today was a very extensive post-cabinet press briefing. I'm very happy that Mr. Hunter and his team were able to join us. I want to thank Minister Favor Williams and her team from the Ministry of Education and Youth, as well as Minister Camilla Johnson-Smith and her team from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade. Also members of the media who attended and asked some very important questions. And also you, the viewers, who have been with us for the past almost 2 hours for this special post-cabinet press briefing. We want to say to you to have a wonderful, have a safe day, and until next Wednesday, 8 a.m. sharp, stay tuned for another post-cabinet press briefing. Thank you.
If you no want pop down and fenke, you fi burn